I now give the floor to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, before I start my statement, I would like to state yet once again that members of the European Union are moving forward an unacceptable practice of inviting an excessive number of delegations representing the European Union and NATO under Rule 37. And we have stated several times there is no added value that members of a bloc state that can be brought to our meetings. We will hear once again the same notions, the same variations on the same theme. And we regret the fact that the French presidency decided to disregard the rules of procedure of the Council. Mr. President, the formal reason for the convening of the European accolades of the Kiev regime of the meeting of the Security Council today was the fact that the Russian forces delivered a strike on the 4th of April on one of the restaurants in Kryvyi Rih. As the Ministry of Defense of Russia stated, as a result of a precision missile strike with a high explosive charge against the location of a meeting of unit commanders and Western instructors. As a result of that, the damage was about 85 servicemen and officers of foreign states and about 20 auto vehicles. This operation unquestionably did damage to the command of the Ukrainian forces and a number of NATO armies who had sent their instructors to Ukraine. And in this context, we would like to recall that we on many occasions warned that a gathering of service members as well as that of Western officers and instructors sent to help Kiev, that all of these are legitimate targets for the Russian army. Unfortunately, because of unprofessional actions by the Ukrainian air defense, the intercepting Ukrainian missile was the reason for the civilian lives lost in the territories next to the restaurant. In any event, that is what is being showed by the characteristics of the warheads, which had been witnessed by eyewitnesses, those who happened to be right next to the restaurant at the moment of their death. The fact that there was a military meeting in one of an urban areas with the dense residential buildings also shows that the Kiev regime has disregard for the lives of peaceful Ukrainians who are being used essentially as a human shield to cover for their military activity. Despite the fact that the military targets, the fact that they were attained was confirmed by objective control and Ukrainian social network users, despite that, the Kiev regime immediately tried to shift the accent from tangible military damage and accuse Russia of targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. And according to them, supposedly cluster munitions were being used for that. This version, as we can see also through the meeting today, was taken up by the European sponsors of the Kiev regime. We have on many occasions encountered a situation when the Ukrainian propaganda machine tried to present the consequences of the flawed work of their own air defense, to present them as targeted strikes by Ukrainian forces by Russian forces on Ukrainian infrastructure. But this can be easily refuted, all of those, including the instance today, and this is done through the video clips in the internet, the videos made by ordinary citizens. I would just like to recall a few examples here. In November 2022, for example, we were accused in targeted destructions of residential buildings in Kiev and Vyshgorod. This was quickly refuted when we saw video clips about the consequences of the work of air defense. In July 2023, we had the event having to do with the Transfiguration Cathedral in Odessa. At the time, in the network, there were videos in the internet showing that a missile defense missile is starting, cannot reach the needed height, and then goes down and explodes. And then when you see the explosion, you can see the spire of the belfry really clearly. Or there were attempts to place on Russia the blame on the strike against the children's hospital hospital Ahmadet in July 2024, and this despite the fact that eyewitnesses filmed the moment that the Ukrainian air defense hit the building. This also includes the explosion of a school in Suma on 24th of March. This was presented as a targeted strike by Russian forces against civilian infrastructure. At the last meeting of the Security Council, we have very convincingly shown that that was also a fake. And now also the statements of the Kiev regime are being refuted by what we have in the social networks done by Ukrainian eyewitnesses from the place of the strike. They show a great volume of smoke and dust, and this means that a blast fragmentation charge was used and not cluster munitions. If this had been a cluster munition, an explosion cloud would not have been there at all. Instead of that, what you have heard would have been the explosions of submunitions, and according to eyewitnesses, there were no such explosions. I would like to repeat here today what we have already stated in this chamber. The Russian military only strike military targets, and also those targets which have to do with the military potential of the Kiev regime. We have stated many times that the Zelensky regime continues deploying their air defense in the residential areas of Ukrainian towns. I would like to put a question to USG Fletcher. Is that not a violation of international humanitarian law? Why is this not being talked about? As a result of what's being done by Ukrainian air defense, an absolute majority of the cases, they are the reason for the death and suffering of civilians. And in this regard, we very strongly recommend to all civilians to stay as far away as possible from the places where the Ukrainian or Western military servicemen are gathering, because a strike against such a legitimate target can be delivered at any point. Ukrainians, of course, are not being told the truth about that. The clique in Kiev will do everything they can to milk the tragedy they are responsible for the maximum propaganda effect, and our meeting today is an important element of this strategy. The good illustration of that is that the very day after the incident, we had an interview in YouTube, an interview with the chief of Ukrainian intelligence, Mr. Budanov, and he stated the following, and I quote, "There is absolutely no need to know the whole truth. Otherwise, people can come up with different kinds of opinions." End of quote. He also added to that and said that information should be provided in small doses, and people can only expect to find out the whole truth later. Commenting these kinds of statements are pointless. They speak for themselves. Of course, no one is going to tell the Ukrainians about the atrocities that the nationalists conducted in the border Kursk Oblast, which they held since the beginning of August, and from which they're being pushed out by the Russian forces. After the hamlet of Gusevo was liberated this morning, the Ukrainian army now is only in control of 2 border villages. And we did speak in detail about the crimes of Ukrainian nationalists at the Aria informal meeting on the 2nd of April. Nor will the Ukrainians be told about the continuous shelling of Russian border towns. In the past week alone, 8 civilians were killed as a result of that, and 106 wounded. Mr. President, our attention is drawn to the fact that information about strikes of Ukrainian military objects in Ukrainian towns is presented by the Zelensky regime as a fact showing that Russia is not ready for peace and is trying to undermine the peace initiatives of the new American administration. It is clear that these attempts, the goal they have is to undermine the American-Russian dialogue and torpedo the potential agreements that the Kiev regime will have to accept. But I have to disappoint you. What you're doing is far too obvious, and your statements are far too removed from reality to be able to believe them. You have betrayed yourselves when you started saying that the possible ceasefire could be used to pump Ukraine with weapons, to bringing new reserves to the fronts, and you showed this way that your interest is not at all in stopping military activities, but in making sure that the Ukraine can lick its wounds and resume its war down to the last Ukrainian in pursuit of your geopolitical interests. The scenario that's being discussed by Russia and the United States now consists not of that, obviously, but it's trying to find a sustainable long-term solution to the Ukrainian conflict. And what is needed for that is to do away with its root causes. They include pumping Ukraine with Western weaponry. And this, as we well know, started long before the special military operation of ours and was being conducted under the cover of Minsk agreements. We are ready to have a serious and practical dialogue, but we will not allow anyone to deceive us. We will not allow anyone to use this negotiating process in the interest of strengthening the Kiev regime's military potential. As we stated on many occasions, demilitarization is one of the goals of the special military operation of ours, and it will be implemented using military or negotiating means in such a way to make sure that Ukraine is no longer a threat to Russia. Therefore, our negotiating process on issues having to do with Ukrainian settlements and other issues continues fully in line with the Security Council Resolution 2774, passed on the 24th of February. At the same time, as we agreed with the new American team, Russia, since the 18th of March, has been refraining from strikes against the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. This cannot be said about the Zelensky regime. It continues shelling the Russian energy facilities basically on a daily basis. And the 4th to the 7th of April, there were 32 such attacks. How does this tally with the ceasefire proposal put forward by President Trump? This shows yet once again that you can't negotiate with the Ukrainian leadership, which lost its legitimacy almost a year ago, and convinces us once again that no agreements with the Kiev clique that usurped power are impossible. We hope that our American colleagues also see this clearly. They have now an excellent opportunity to see the true intentions of those whom the British and European Party of War place its stake on. Thank you.
I give the floor to the representative of Ukraine. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank French Presidency for convening today's Security Council meeting, and I am grateful to USG Mr. Fletcher for his substantive briefing. My delegation called this meeting because the Russian Federation does not want a ceasefire. Every missile, every strike drone, killing people every day, prove that Russia only wants war. It has not only failed to cease its attacks on Ukrainian civilians, it has significantly escalated scale and lethality of its assaults. Sunday, April 6, was the day of mourning in Ukraine after the most brazen attack carried out on April 4, which, according to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, was the deadliest single strike harming children that the United Nations has verified since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. The Russian Federation launched an Iskander-M ballistic missile at a residential neighborhood in the city of Kryvyi Rih, killing 20 people, of which 9 children. Over 60 civilians, among whom 12 children, sustained injuries of varying severity. The youngest victim, a 3-month-old baby. Staying silent about the fact that it is Russia killing children with ballistic missiles is wrong and dangerous. It only emboldens the scum in Moscow to continue the war and keep ignoring diplomacy. Weakness has never ended a war. That's why we are thankful to each and every member state whose representatives have spoken out. Our whole country is mourning children killed by the Russian terrorists in Kryvyi Rih. These are, according to Russian representative, military targets in Ukraine. Timofey, forever 3 years old. Radislav, forever 7 years old. Arina, forever 7 years old. Herman, forever 9 years old. Mikita, forever 15 years old. Danilo, forever 15 years old. Alina, forever 15 years old. Danilo and Alina were a couple, and they were buried yesterday together. Konstantin, forever 16 years old. Nikita, forever 17 years old. The attack on our children was carried out with exceptional cruelty. The Russian ballistic missile was equipped with a cluster warhead, deliberately designed to maximize casualties. It targeted a purely residential area during the early Friday evening, a time when many families were gathering ahead of the weekend. The missile landed near a playground and tore through homes, schools, and a restaurant. In addition to the ballistic missile, the Russian Federation launched attack drones against Kryvyi Rih during the rescue operation. The drone attack killed at least one person and injured 7 others. There is no deeper violence or hatred toward our people. This aligns with the so-called double-tap attacks perpetrated by terrorist organizations and replicated en masse by Russian Federation in its terror campaign against Ukraine and the Ukrainians. We categorically reject Russia's blatant falsehoods about alleged military targets in the area. Facts from the crime scene make it clear there were no military objectives in the vicinity. Russia's true aim was deliberately terror against civilians. Russia must be held accountable for everything it has done. To end this war, it is necessary to put pressure on them, real pressure, without wasting time on empty talk. We thank the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, whose team visited the site the following day to document the damage and identify the victims. It reported extensive destruction caused by shrapnel strike, Russian representatives' lies and disinformation, which we heard today, and in fact always. It confirms that there was no military presence at the restaurant or in the surrounding area at the time of the strike. We appreciate the efforts of UNICEF and its partners on the ground, who are supporting affected families and coordinating with local authorities to deliver emergency assistance. We welcome their call for an immediate end to attacks on civilian areas in Ukraine. A resolute international response to Russian atrocities is crucial. Such terror must never become the norm. We call for both strong condemnation and decisive actions. Russian Federation must stop its terror against Ukrainian people, respond to the US proposal for an immediate interim 30-day full ceasefire, which Ukraine has accepted, and end its war of aggression against my country. Unfortunately, yet not surprisingly, Russian Federation has refused to support full ceasefire initiative. Almost every day, in response to this proposal, Russia targets Ukrainian cities and villages with drones, bombs, artillery, and ballistic and cruise missile attacks. Mr. President, as Security Council members already underscored, not even 2 weeks have passed since the last Security Council meeting on Ukraine. But this was enough for Russia to cause significant loss of life and widespread destruction. 26 March, a massive attack on civilian infrastructure and residential areas in Kharkiv and the Kharkiv region. At least 12 civilians, including 2 children, injured. Same evening, Dnipro and Dnipropetrovsk region, one of the most intense drone attacks in 3 years, at least 3 civilians injured. 27 March, swarms of deadly Shahed drones attack residential areas of Dnipro and Kharkiv, other Ukrainian cities. Dozens of civilians injured, including children. Same day, an artillery strike on Kherson, killing a woman and injuring a man. 28 March, a massive attack with 172 strike drones, destruction across the country. In Dnipro, at least 4 civilians killed and 25 injured, including a pregnant woman. 29 March, missile strike on Kryvyi Rih, 9 civilians injured, 3 of whom hospitalized. Same evening, a massive attack on Kharkiv, 2 civilians killed and at least 35 others injured, including 5 children. 30 March, attacks across Ukraine, drones, artillery, and guided aerial bombs hit Cherkasy, Kherson, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, Sumy, and Kharkiv regions. In Kupiansk, Kharkiv region, one of the 15 guided aerial bombs struck a 5-story residential building, injuring at least 4 civilians. 31st March, another drone attack on Kharkiv, at least 3 civilians injured. 1st April, artillery shelling of Krasny Liman in Donetsk region, destroying an utility building. Body fragments were found and handed over for identification. 2nd April, massive overnight attack with 74 drones and approximately 50 guided aerial bombs targeting Kharkiv, Odessa, and Sumy regions. In Kharkiv, at least 8 people injured, including 3 children. 2nd April, a Russian strike on Druzhkivka, Donetsk region, and on Kharkiv, where drones hit a 16-story residential building. At least 5 civilians injured, including a 10-year-old boy and 65-year-old woman. Same day, a ballistic missile attack, Kryvyi Rih, at least 4 civilians killed and 14 injured, including at least 2 children aged 8 and 6. 3rd April, a drone strikes on residential buildings in Kharkiv, at least 5 civilians killed, including a 12-year-old girl, 34 injured, including 2 children, 28 buildings damaged, leaving residents without gas, electricity, or heating. Kyiv, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhzhia regions also under attacks that day. 4 April, in Brovary, Kyiv region, Russian drone attack injures 2 civilians. In Dnipro, another massive overnight drone attack injured at least 3 civilians and caused multiple fires. Same day, the Russian Federation struck Konstantinovka and Rodensky in Donetsk region. Mr. President, Moscow speaks about peace while launching brutal strikes daily on densely populated residential areas in major Ukrainian cities. These strikes are abhorrent and appalling war crimes constituting a grave violation of international humanitarian law. With these barbaric attacks against Ukrainian civilians and children, Russia demonstrates its complete disregard for international peace efforts led by the United States. Russia shows unrelenting will to continue its war of aggression against Ukraine. Let us keep it in perspective. Moscow has not moved 1 inch away from its genocidal and maximalist war aims. Russia continues to focus on elimination of Ukraine as a state and Ukrainians as a nation. It is now crystal clear that Russia is the major and only obstacle to peace. On the other hand, Ukraine has always been and remains committed to peace. We have taken concrete steps towards peace, unlike Russia, which continues to drag its feet and commit atrocities. Mr. President, only from the pressure of the world on the Russian Federation, from all collective efforts to strengthen Ukraine, our air defense, our forces, only on this depends when the war will end. Ukraine has clearly demonstrated our desire for peace and commitment to give peace a chance. No one wants peace more than our people. We need strong measures and decisive actions to push the Russian Federation toward peace before it kills more children and ruins the lives of more families. We can see that Putin does not want to end the war. He is looking for ways to preserve the option of reuniting it in any moment with even greater force. That's exactly why all forms of pressure on Russia must continue, strengthening our ability to defend ourselves, maintaining sanctions, and ensuring that diplomacy, any conversation with Moscow, leaves them no opportunity to kill. If there is a ceasefire, it must be unconditional, one that does not allow for the destruction of life. We will rebuild buildings and entire cities demolished by the Russian attacks. Ukraine already manages to do that. But we will never return the lives of our people. Russia must be held responsible for this war, and it will be. We continue working closely with our American and European partners to achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting peace for Ukraine, and Europe based on the principles of the UN Charter and with clear security guarantees. Thank you.